This is National Chess Master Bill Richards, and I'm here with Chess Online Instruction. It's a new site set to launch October 17th, 2012. I'm really excited about this site. There are a number of top-level professional chess coaches coming aboard to help assist you to develop your game. I myself am going to be in charge of the rating level between 1,000 and 1,300. Now, what does that mean, you ask? Well, if you're a complete beginner, new to the game, you're not there yet. But if you've played the game a little bit, maybe you've looked at a few books, played some online chess, played at your local club, and you understand a lot of the basics, like what do you do in the opening, how to win with combinations, how to play out an ending. If you have a basic understanding of some of those, you're probably in that 1,000 to 1,300 class, and it's a good class to be in. It's because there's so much to learn that's pretty easy to learn, and you can really develop fast. It all depends on you. I'm here to help you. I'm going to show you a game of one of my students here in just a minute. He's rated, was at the time this was played, was rated just above 1,300, and he's been struggling in the 1,300 level now for 2 years. Now this is a level just above you, but it's something for you to set your sights on. Can you play as well as him? If you can, and certainly you can, then you're all set to move into the next level, and I'm going to help you get there. Okay? So this particular person is a student of mine, and as I said, he was stuck in this rating level for a solid 2 years. He's just been working with me for a couple months now, and he's already moved his rating since this game was played up to 1,400, and he expects to go higher. Chess is a game. I can show you everything I can, but at some point you're going to have to do the work. You're the one playing the game, right? So when you sit down to play your opponent, you have to learn to think for yourself. And I'm an experienced chess instructor, and I'll tend to show you a lot of the reasons behind the moves that you play, why you want to do something and why you don't want to do something. And all the facets of how to get better at chess are going to be available in my video series here at Chess Online Instruction. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and have a look at this game and see what happened. Okay, so we've now what we call transposed into an opening called the French defense. It's when white usually plays his first move of e4. The fact that he didn't play something else doesn't matter. This is now a French defense. Okay? And you don't need to know everything about the French defense. It's too complicated and well beyond the scope of this video. Okay, and there's a number of choices black has in this position. The one he plays is perfectly logical, and white plays a line that I actually favor. If you were to sit down and look this opening up, it's called the winnower defense to the French defense. You'll find maybe entire books written on this opening. Thousands and thousands of master games. That's a lot of work. White plays a line that avoids most of someone's preparation. White plays bishop d3. Now, honestly, I don't think white knew this opening. And the fact that he played this move is good, because now black doesn't get to play any kind of preparation he had. He's swimming on his own. He could be prepared for this, but he too is rated just above 1,300, and chances are he isn't. So pretty much both players are on their own right now, and that's what you want. You want to get out of opening theory, and I'll explain some of the reasons for that in future lessons. Okay? So let's step forward and see what black does, and then white continues his development. And the one thing that I stress in all these games I'm going to show is to develop your pieces. Chess is a game of war. If you leave your pieces back where they started, they're not going to get in the fight, and you're simply going to be overwhelmed by a superior force. Just think of chess like a war, and that's what's going to happen. So both sides need to develop their pieces, and right now that's what they're doing, which is good. Okay, and then white develops another piece. Now, at this point, black starts to commit some mistakes. They're not enough to cost him the game, but if you make enough mistakes, they add up and they do cost you the game. So what was I stressing just a moment ago? Development. Black makes instead a puzzling move, and it's a move that I see very common at this rating level. People will play this particular move, and let's go ahead and have a look and see what Black did, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, Black plays h6, or pawn to king rook 3. Now, what's wrong with this move? Well, first off, it didn't develop a piece. Second off, what Black's trying to do is maybe keep a white piece out of this square here. I'm pointing with my mouse, G5, okay? He's trying to keep a white piece out of that square. That's the only thing that I've been able to deduce. Black's trying to prevent white from going there. Well, really, white doesn't want to go there. White wants to develop objectively. So Black needn't worry about that. Let's find a better move for Black. And here's one I suggest. Okay. Develops a piece. Now, what's White going to do? Some of you might naturally want to instinctively just push by with your pawn. You push here. But this gives Black a new square for his knight, f5. Now, suddenly that knight that was sitting at home is now developed. And chances are Black's going to acquire the bishop pair. Generally, bishops are worth more than knights, although at this rating level they're about even. But it's still, if you can get them, it's good. So either Black's going to take the bishop on e3, or White will be probably taking the knight on f5. White can't afford to move his bishop away because his bishop is guarding d4. Okay, so what else could White do instead of pushing by? That just gave up a square. Well, let's play the move that Black was trying to prevent. Let's go ahead and look at that and see if it's really any good. There, that's the only white piece that could go to that square, right? G5. Well, in this case, Black just simply kicks the bishop back out, and he's threatening to take it, and White must retreat it. And then it's Black's turn, so Black has gained some time in the opening. Okay, so really, what Black should have done was simply develop his pieces. The fact that he didn't just hurts him a little bit. Now let's think about it too. Black also needs to get castled here, okay? Well, actually, so does White. But if you think about it for a moment, since Black needs to castle, what's he have to do? He either has to castle kingside or queenside, right? To castle kingside, he needs to move his knight, and he didn't. To castle queenside, he needs to move his queen, and he didn't. So Black's just a little bit further behind from castling. White is ready to castle, and that's exactly what White does. He castles. Now Black once again makes a puzzling move. Again, it doesn't help his development. He plays his pawn to f6. Now this seems to be kind of dangerous. White has a lot of good moves here, and let's before we talk about those, let's just look at what f6 did. f6 took away perhaps that knight's best square. This knight on g8 can never get to f6 because there's a pawn in the way. Okay, so it's true the knight still has a square to go to e7, but he's taken a square away. Also, Black still remains 2 moves from castling. Theoretically, he could be castling about now, but he's wasted 2 pawn moves, so he can't. Okay, it also opens up a diagonal against the king. You know, kind of we call it from the h5 to e8 diagonal. White could occupy that in a hurry, and perhaps White didn't just simply see the win of a pawn here. He made a simple mistake. All White needs to do is just take this pawn on d5. That's all he needs to do, and it has a double threat. Well, triple or quadruple threat, you could say. White's attacking both the knight and the pawn, as you can see by the arrows, but at the same time, he's threatening to give a bishop g6 check, which will stop black from castling. Okay, plus there's a shortage of defenders on the pawn on d5. So white has a lot of wonderful opportunities here, and he didn't see them. But at this rating level, I want to mention one thing. About half the moves you guys make are not going to be the best move. Doesn't mean they're outrageous blunders. It just means some will be. Some will be maybe second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh best choice. It's going to happen at this rating level. So we want to train you to recognize mistakes and take advantage of them. Now, the best way to take advantage of a mistake is just to develop. When an opponent makes a mistake in the opening, you don't need to try to score a quick knockout victory, although it might be possible. If you develop your pieces, that quick knockout is coming. It's a guarantee if you play carefully. It's a virtual guarantee. You can have all the chances and all the fun while your opponent's going to sit there and sweat. And you'll like that when you have a good position with all kinds of possibilities. And that's what's going to happen in White's game here in a little bit. So White missed his best chance here, but what he played wasn't a bad move. And again, even though he didn't play it, he played pawn to f4, even though he didn't take on d5, there's nothing else wrong with this move. He's supporting the center, and he's just simply taking advantage of the fact that black has wasted two moves. So White can afford to go ahead and waste a move. Now, we don't want you to be wasting moves when your opponent's wasting moves, but you can afford to do it. That's the point I'm trying to get at. Okay, so now black kind of tips his hand here a little bit. He plays queen e7. Now, what's he trying to do? His last three moves have taken away every possible square his king-knight could develop to. So if he wants to develop that king-knight, he's going to have to move one of the three chessmen that he's just moved, either the queen or one of his pawns. But black's not worried about developing that knight. He should have, though. He should have been worried about it because you got to get your pieces out. Remember, I said you can't leave them back at home. But what black's trying to do here is castle queenside. That's what he's trying to do, and let's just see how things develop. Okay, white pushes his pawn, seizes a lot of center space. Okay, and black castles. Now, this is what we call opposite side castling. One side castles king side, the other side castles queen side. And ideally, when you castle on the opposite side of your opponent, you want to launch an attack against his king. That's what you want to do. But you have to be careful about one thing. Your opponent's going to want to do the same thing. Okay? So black isn't really ready to attack the white king. Why? He didn't develop. He should have known that. He probably did know it. Even if you didn't know it already, you probably figured it out from this video, and that's good. I'm proud of you. Okay, so basically, if you have white here, which my student did, he knows that what he needs to do is attack the black king on the queen side. So think about a plan of action. What are you going to do if you're white here? I encourage you at any point in any of my videos to pause them, and sometimes I'll directly say pause the video and see if you can come up with the next move. Okay, so let's consider our options. The only thing we have left to develop is our queen. We could say that the rook on a1 is developed. We don't need to bring it to the center because we're going to try to attack the king. So I've been saying all along that maybe all white needs to do is develop. So there's nothing wrong with queen d2. But if you pause the video, you might choose between that and one other move. Okay, you've paused the video, you've come back, maybe you found this move. I'm not saying it's the best move, I'm not saying it's the worst move, but it's a very logical move because it puts the question to that bishop, and white's getting ready to do what he wants to do. Advance his pawns on the queen side. If he advances his pawns on the queen side, things can happen. That position of the black king can get busted open, and he'll become a target. Okay, so black probably commits an error here. Let's take a look and see what he did play. He plays bishop a5, and we're going to see why that's an error in a moment. At this point, what black needed to do was not waste any time and simply take this knight off. And then white has two choices to recapture, and each one is perfectly logical, and there's reasons behind it. Let me show the reasons. Okay, we could take with the pawn if we want. What this does is it opens up a file, a direct file, the B file in this case, against the enemy king. Nothing wrong with that. At some point, white may be wanting to try to open up the position for his two bishops and try to break black's foothold in his pawn center, break that apart so that the two bishops can come into action against the king. So eventually white might be trying to break with pawn to c4. That's one plan of action. The other plan of action is just simply to take with the knight. This avoids having double pawns, and it brings the knight over to the queen side, where the knight's going to try to join the party after white continues to advance his pawns. White will continue with moves like b5 and a5, or pawn to b4 and eventually to b5, and this pawn will be moving up the board too to help out. Okay, so either one's a perfectly logical move. It's a matter of choice. It doesn't matter in a way which one you pick, as long as you know how to follow it up. And you follow it up just by mobilizing your developed pieces. And since white's developed, he's all set to start mobilizing. Okay, so as I said, black probably committed an error here, and this allows white to continue on his merry way of attacking on the queen side. So the next move is perfectly logical, and I'm sure you see it and anticipate it, and that's to play pawn to b4. Now the white pawns are just rolling up the board free of charge. Every time one of them moves, it's with a threat that black has to deal with. Okay, and now the bishop comes back to b6. I know the little things making arrows, it's suggesting moves or threats. You don't need to worry about all those, especially since it's white's move. Okay, let's see what white does. He comes up with, again, a logical move. We want to advance our pawns on the queen side. It may not have been the best move, but it works. And here I feel, once again, black committed an error. If you look at the board, that knight's under attack. It has to be dealt with. It's got two reasonable squares. So this is a good point. I'm going to mention something I've kind of hinted at. We call candidate moves. A candidate move is basically a move that's a candidate for your selection. If you're playing black here, you really only have two possible moves, because if you do anything else, you're going to lose that knight. That knight only has two squares to go to. So unless black has some kind of what we call a Zwischenzug, that's a term for an in-between move where black can generate a threat, then one of those candidate moves must be selected. But black doesn't have a useful Zwischenzug here, simply because he's not completely developed. So black played knight b8, and that's the worst move, and we'll see how this turns out in a moment. But let's consider for a moment the move knight a5. What does knight a5 do? Well, now the white pawns are kind of stymied. That pawn on a3, it's not going anywhere. The pawn on b5, it's not going anywhere. White's going to have to generate some kind of activity to continue his attack. And in a lot of my videos I've already made, I have a term. I play what I call fantasy chess. And that's just my term for it. It's not a fantasy. It's just one possible line. There'll be many lines that could happen, and many possible variations in the one line I select, but I just select one line to handle time constraints and give the ideas. And the serious student will take a chessboard, set it up, and play out the possibilities themselves, because that's how you get good. You analyze possibilities and try to solve these problems on your own. Okay, probably the best fantasy move is to play knight a4. This gives the knight some mobility. It's getting ready to hop into c5. White's now, his next step to advance a pawn is a c pawn, so he's trying to get that thing going. Now, to continue with fantasy play, the way I like to do it is I'll just develop pieces for the opposition and see what happens. So the only we've got to get that knight on g8 developed. See, I'm wiggling him over here. See him screaming for some help? Well, one way to get him developed is to move one of those three chessmen. Now let's try the queen. Okay, now that clears e7 for the knight. Okay, now white continues on his way. And here I'll give a couple possibilities. We'll talk about them. I don't want to go too much into detail. If black elects to take this knight, which is what white wants, even though white gets some double pawns, as I said earlier, his bishops are opening up. White's two pawns are getting closer. Maybe he can work something up with one of these pawn pushes. And there's another pawn push in there that maybe at some point can come into play. Or maybe we can attack that knight and force black to weaken his pawns, because he's going to have to play b6 to guard that pawn. So white has a number of possibilities here. So black probably doesn't want to take that knight. But I just wanted to point out what happens if he does. But let's go back to what I call fantasy chess and develop for black. So there, we got the guy out. Okay? Now white needs a plan. This knight on a5, let's go after it. That's a good plan. Let's play the bishop to d2. Okay? And then, as I said, black needs to develop. So let's bring his queen over to the king side. Now black's getting ready to start advancing his pawns and create threats of his own. And then white just slightly slides his queen over one square. Now look, the knight on a5 is under attack. It needs to move. If he doesn't move it, he's going to lose it. So knight comes to c4, and one possible line right here is just to play and take it off. And then black retakes, and now it's white's turn. And he just continues going on with advancing his pawns and continuing his attack. So white's accomplished this. Just by maneuvering his pieces, he's found a way to get his pawns rolling again. And like I say, this is just one possible line. Okay, let's go back to what happened in the game and see how it turned out. Okay, white continued with his pawn storm, and black starts looking for resources, trying to weather that storm. But he's neglecting his development, unfortunately. Okay, black chooses c6. And white's next move is logical. He continues with his plan, advances pawns. And now the bishop has one square to move to. And here it's kind of interesting. White comes up with a good move. He sees a possible threat. Okay, the move he selects, and I'll go ahead and show it to you, is queen to b1. Queen to b1 plans, and the arrow is pointing it. It's planning to push the pawn to b6. And that traps the bishop. When the bishop is trapped, black will be down a piece and be left with a lost game. So there's nothing black can really do here except try some desperate measures. Okay, probably black should have moved this rook and created a square for that bishop to retreat to, and I'll show you why in a moment. But he takes this pawn off. And what white does is perfectly logical, and I'll show you what white does, and then we'll come back and look at another possible line. White plays f takes e5, which renews the threat of pawn to b6. But what white could have done is just gone ahead and trapped the bishop. And I believe that let's see, maybe get this right. That white was afraid of something. White saw the possible tactic that black might be pushing this pawn to e4 and trapping his bishop, and he didn't analyze it all the way out. Okay, but we'll do that. Let's analyze it out and see what happens. Okay, suppose black plays e4 right now. Okay, well, white just has a wonderful move. He just takes the pawn off, and black grabs his bishop. White recaptures, and if you look at this, and there's giving it away. There's nothing black can do to stop white from queening his pawn. White's going to have a new queen. He's given up a piece for this. White is down a piece, but he's going to have an extra queen, and it looks pretty gruesome after this. Let's have a look. Knight f6. You promote to a queen, and then pretty much the game's over. Black really doesn't have any resources. So what black would need to do here is to stop and take this pawn off, but then white just continues with about his way. Black does what he wants to do, trap that bishop, but now white stops and takes the bishop. And if black takes his bishop here, he's going to lose a rook with check, so he has to stop and take back here. Now, the only good thing is that bishop is trapped, but it's really not that good because white just gets what he can for it. He grabs that pawn, and now white's position is just overwhelming. Black really has no good play here. Let's continue the fantasy chess line and develop a piece for black, and then white just makes a threat, and the threat is mate in 1. Black's got to guard b7, and then white just brings another attacker onto the b7 square, and there's nothing black can do. He's going to lose this real quick. But let's go back to to this position here, where white did take back. Black really has no good move now. Okay, what he elected to play was queen e8. Okay, now it's white's turn. So we go ahead and take and push the pawn and win it. But let me just back up for just a moment. I want to show one thing I didn't show. If black plays rook e8, for example, white's just got this incredible position that black can really do nothing with, and I'll show you. Let's go ahead and push this pawn, and then black needs to take. And here it's black's move, and look at how tied down he is. His light squared bishop cannot move, period. The dark squared bishop cannot move. It's going to be taken on either square it can move to. The knight on g8 cannot move. It's going to be taken. The rook on h8 cannot move. It's going to be taken. White will just continue to strengthen this position and have a winning game. And let's take a look at one important point at the white position. All he did was push some pawns to open up the squares, and he's moved his 2 knights and his 2 bishops 1 time. That's it. He hasn't moved them a second time, just once. White castled, he didn't move his queen rook, and he moved his queen once. So but all white did was develop. He developed each piece. Each piece got developed. And look at all the wonderful possibilities he's had as a result of just making one move with each of his pieces. It's just remarkable what development will do for you. Okay, let's back it up and get back to the main line. He played queen e8, and now white just wins a piece, and black is left with a lost game. And now it's just a matter of finishing black off, and the game wraps up rather quickly. Okay, so white really has his choice of good moves here, and doesn't matter what black does. Now, white stops and makes kind of a puzzling move, and I want to just discuss that for a moment. But it's one he can afford to make. He plays bishop d4. I think he's afraid, maybe he sees that the black knight might go to d7 and be attacking the queen on b6 and the pawn on e5. Well, you know what? Let's let him. Let's bring another piece over. Instead of bishop d4, let's play rook fb1. Black has basically no move. On knight d7, the move that white was afraid of, white wins with a wonderful combination. Go ahead and pause the video and try and solve it. Okay, are you back? Try this. Queen takes check. You take. Black's moves are pretty much forced. You check him here. King has to come up. You check him again. The king goes back. And then checkmate. I hope you found that. Okay, let's get back to the game. And again, if black tries the move black played king d7 here, but if black tries the move that maybe white was afraid of, white just forces it right back. And looks like black's going to have to come back. And it's just a wonderful game for white here. Okay, there's many ways to win that. So what black tried after bishop d4 was he brought his king out, trying to run for the hills, although it's not sure how far he can run. White's controlling that open f file. Okay, so rook a7 and rook c8. Now white plays a fine move, knight b8. Black can't take it. It allows a checkmate in one on queen d6. And just about any other move white has is good beside from that. That's how strong this white position is. Okay, so black tries to get a queen trade to alleviate some of the pressure, but white just carries on with his assault. Always check. It might be mates, an old saying. And really, black has no possible moves here. Just give you an example, fantasy chess. If king e8, white can win pretty easily with rook a takes b7. And for instance, on bishop takes b7, this is just one line. Queen takes e6, knight e7, knight d6 check. Now the only legal move black has is to take the knight, and not only is white up a lot of material, he's attacking e7 3 times, and the game is over. Black's going to lose this quickly. So black elected to finally develop his knight, but it's too little too late. And white comes up with a very nice combination. Here he has a 1300 player getting better, and he finds a nice combination. And it's the kind that you should be able to find too. If you can't yet, don't worry, you will be. Okay, rook takes b7 check. Black tries bishop takes b7, and then check. And then white finds a nice continuation here. He takes the rook, and black takes back. And then white discovers he can win the black queen. He's actually going to win more than the black queen. He's going to win every piece that black has. He plays rook takes e7, and at this point, black resigned. He has two legal moves. If he plays king d8, we have a mate in one. His alternative is to take the rook, and white just grabs the queen, and the king can only go back. That's the only place he can go. And doesn't matter where he goes, white's gonna pick up that knight too with check, and the king has to come up, and there's no way he can guard the rook. And now white's up queen in 3 pieces, and it looks like a pawn for good measure. So I hope you enjoyed this. I look forward to getting to know all of you that join Chess Online Instruction. I do give private lessons at $20 an hour, and these video series I'll be making, there should be about 3 every month that you'll be able to view with your membership, and looking forward to meeting you in the forums and so forth. But check out the site. Let it speak for itself. Take your time, read what it has, and come back and watch the videos. All right, take care. Thanks.